let's do this. So, hello everyone. Let me know in the chat box if you've been to one of my webinars before, and that will give me some reference, either of my teletherapy webinars. If you have, you will have seen this slide before. Who am I? I'm Brooke Dibley. I'm an Auckland-based speech language therapist. I've been a speech therapist for 7 years. I've been private for 3 years. My area of interest is the use of technology and digital materials in speech therapy. Up until 2020, I did a 50-50 split in my caseload between in-person and teletherapy. In the past, you may have been to one of my webinars where I spoke to you about teletherapy in this new season, where a lot of us are working from home. And now I know that many of you are headed back to in-person therapy. And like I said, I used to do in-person therapy as well, but still had that passion for digital. So most of the things I use in teletherapy, I also use in person, just in a different way. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. A few disclaimers before we start. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is using an iPad in speech therapy or a tablet, just because we will talk about the computer a tad, but I'd like to think that it's common sense how to do what you did in teletherapy on a computer in person. You just wouldn't share your screen. So if you have been doing teletherapy and you had those websites you really liked, then or anything you were using on your computer, if you have a laptop, you can do the exact same thing on your laptop sitting next to a student. And that's a little more straightforward than how to then translate that to an iPad. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight. I use an iPad. I create materials to use on an iPad, and so therefore that's why I mostly talk about iPads. However, I do know that a lot of these apps and things will work on an Android as well. However, if anyone ever asks me which device I recommend, it's definitely an iPad. It's just more user-friendly in the sense that most things work on it. I run Simply Speaking SLT, which is a blog, and I also own the store Simply Speaking SLT as well. And there's links to my social media there because I share a bunch of tips and tutorials and stuff over there as well. All right, so let's have this first chat and let's get it out of the way. Screen time versus therapy facilitation. This is something I think is one of the biggest barriers to why a lot of speech therapists are really apprehensive in using their device in speech therapy in person, and I totally get that. But I just want to point out these two pictures. There's a big difference between the two things that are happening here. This one on the left, yeah, I call that screen time. This one on the right, I call this facilitating engagement. We're going to talk a little bit about that here tonight, but it definitely is a subjective opinion, whether or not a device can facilitate engagement. But the main thing I want to kind of point out is the technology does not replace you. It's a tool that you use to facilitate therapy and gains. Okay? So you don't have to choose is another thing I want to point out. Okay, guys? So as you can see here, these are all pictures from my real life speech therapy sessions that I've taken out doing therapy in schools. And as you can see, I will often use them together. It's very rare that I will have a session where I'm just using my iPad. I like to meld together really awesome hands-on manipulatives and great digital resources to come together and create a lot of engagement. And to be honest, save a lot of time because you don't have to print, laminate, and cut when you're using a digital resource or an app. So so my biggest take home I want for you is that digital resources should reduce the prep time and increase the fun. Okay, that's my tagline. That's what I'm all about. That's what I try to create as well. Tonight, I will be showing you some of the things I create. They're just examples. Please do not hear me and think that I'm saying you need my resources to use digital tools in therapy. We're going to talk about a bunch of apps as well, free apps, paid apps that I have nothing to do with and am not affiliated with. But of course, that's what I know because that's what I make. So we will see those a lot tonight as well. So let's ask the question then, is it a good digital tool? So if you're considering using a digital tool, by tool I mean an app, a website, a material, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you're considering using a digital tool, ask yourself, will it increase engagement? Does it save you time? Is it versatile? Is it adaptable? Is it easy to use? And is it going to take too long or be too quick? Let me just point out, it's okay if it only answers a couple of those questions. It may not increase engagement, but it may not decrease it either, but it may save you a ton of time. So if it really is going to do the same thing as a printable, like it's not going to increase engagement, but it saves me printing time, laminating time, cutting time, I'm still going to use it. Now, an example of this would be a worksheet where I know that I have this I could print this massive binder, put it all in its little pouches, and it might be this whole collection of worksheets I know I'm going to want to use with a bunch of students. So I might have my master copies, and then we've all done it, and then we photocopy the ones we want for each student. Why not instead have them saved on your iPad and then use them digitally and annotate on top of them? And so sure, the students may be actually more, let's be honest, most of the time they are more engaged annotating on an iPad, but that's not my reason. My reason is, why bother printing it all if the iPad can do it without it? Obviously, guys, we have to individualize our therapy. For some of our kids, this is not appropriate, okay? So that's another disclaimer. This doesn't work for everyone. I have some kids that as soon as I bring out the iPad, there's behaviors. However, I'd like to point out, very functional skill to help our students learn how to understand using a device for education and not just play. This is a very functional educational tool because 9 times out of 10 they will be using a device in their education anyway. So I don't like to shy away from using it just because mum says, oh no, it's a big tantrum causer. If mum says no, sure, I'm not going to use it. Obviously, their consent matters. But if I'm willing to kind of model how I manage the use of the device to engage the student and make it fun, but still also have boundaries, that's even more of a win, right? So, and that's a really good tool mum and dad might be able to use. Now, also, obviously, I'm going to talk about kids a lot if you haven't got that vibe. I don't work with adults. I did use digital resources with adults a lot, however, not as much when I worked at the hospital and stroke rehab. It just didn't translate well. I wanted to do functional therapy, and many of my clients lived in poverty and didn't have access to a device, so I needed to provide things they could do and practice while I wasn't there. But these things I'm going to talk about today, it's a bit different. I'm mostly talking about using these with kids. I'm also mostly talking about using it during sessions, but when appropriate, I'll talk about how I then use them for homework as well. Like if there's parents that want digital homework, because for a lot of my parents, they don't have printers and they prefer something they can just bring up on their device and use. Okay, so that is what I have to say about choosing digital tools. The technology involved, so we're mostly going to talk about iPads and tablets tonight, but there's no shame in taking your laptop. I've taken my laptop all the time. If you don't have an iPad, most of these things, especially digital resources, especially digital materials, which we'll talk about, they're going to work on a computer as well. So I often will take my laptop with me to therapy, especially for my older kids that I want to type. I do use a Bluetooth keyboard with my iPad. I got one very cheaply from AliExpress because I didn't want to pay a ton, because I figured that thing was going to get chucked in my therapy bag and maybe thrown across the room. So you can get some pretty cheap Bluetooth keyboards that I do use a lot with my students that really don't like typing on the iPad, but to be honest, they're all better at it than me these days. Most of my kids. There's another thing to remember. They know more about this stuff than most of us when it comes to use their skills in using devices. So also interactive whiteboards and projectors, they translate really nicely because of course, if you have something on your computer, if you have a smart board that connects up to a computer, whatever is on your computer is on that smart board. And if it is interactive, that if you have the technology in your whiteboard that's interactive, you touch it, then obviously that's going to activate the computer. We're not going to talk about that here tonight. That's why there's an asterisk, but it is just something to be aware of. And smartphones, I'm not going to talk about it much. I don't use my smartphone often in therapy. Well, I do a little bit, but more for things off the cuff, like asking Siri how to spell something, defining something, or if I don't have my iPad out and the kid asks a question, which we'll talk about in a moment as well. But mostly we're just going to talk about tablets and iPads here. Okay, so I'm just keeping an eye on the chat box if anyone has any questions. So the tools we're going to talk about tonight, and some of the first 3 slides that we're about to go through, you might think, well, duh, Brooke, I know. But I just want to point out how many digital tools there are. I think when people think of using their iPad in speech therapy, they just think of apps and they often just think of games. Or they think of AAC apps, right? Cool, great. Those things are awesome. But there's so many other things. So there's apps. There's websites, which you can bring up in your browser on either your computer or your iPad. There's interactive PDFs, which we'll talk about in a moment. They're a type of digital material. There's PowerPoint games, virtual manipulatives, Google apps, digital companions, boom cards, and digital assessments. So I'm going to when I wrote in my slides, I'm going to demo all these soon, but actually I'm going to speak through all of these. If there's time at the end, I'll connect my iPad up to the screen and I'll demo some of these apps. But I wanted to really provide you with all the links and information, so you'll see soon how I just decided to set this up. So let's quickly talk about websites before we get into apps. I'm going to share all my favorite apps, but most websites are available on tablets and computers. One thing to consider, so I've written online games there. Many of us who have been doing teletherapy may have been using online games from somewhere like ABC, Toy Theatre, those kind of things, PBS Kids, Sesame Street, Disney. I don't know about those others, but I do know for ABC, you can't use it in the browser, I don't think, unless you have a paid subscription. However, if there's a couple of games your students are just loving from teletherapy on ABC, for mine it's Build a Car and Build a Pizza. You can buy those from the App Store. So ABC makes them as apps and they're $5 each game. So if you just had a couple, obviously that's American, if you just had a couple that your students were really liking and you wanted to get them on your iPad, then you can do it that way. Alternatively, obviously take your computer. One thing to consider, sometimes you need internet access to use some of these tools. Obviously for online games and websites you do. So consider whether or not your setting provides that. One thing I am not ashamed to do is if there's a school I go to a lot, because I often would go to schools, I would ask for their login. And a lot of the times they'd give me the login. Often I have to hand it over to the office lady and she does it all. But then I get my device back and I have internet access, which makes things so much easier. So if you don't have access to internet, you can hotspot from your phone. This is something else I also do quite often because I personally have a lot of data on my phone. Again, it's that digital therapy side of things that I really love. So I also really love using a lot of data. So hotspotting from your phone is another way that you can send internet to your iPad or to your computer. I'm not going to cover how to do that. There's a ton on Google on how to do that. And remember that most of the websites that you use in teletherapy will actually have an app equivalent. You might not necessarily have to use the browser. So we're going to discuss those here tonight as well. Okay, so let's talk about apps. So the two meatiest parts of this presentation are going to be apps and digital resources. So apps, generally you use them on a tablet or a smartphone, right? Sometimes if you have a Mac, you might call your programs apps. Or sometimes there are Google Chrome apps and stuff, but when I say apps, I'm generally meaning iPad based ones or smartphone based ones. Some are paid and some are free, obviously. Some need internet access and some don't, so you really do need to consider that. Some are games, others are tools, some are digital materials, which I'll show you in a moment. Some are readers and software, so you might not think of a PDF reader as a speech language therapy app, but wait till I show you how you use it to make it a speech therapy app. And then some are obviously SLP specific, so they've been made for us to use in speech therapy. They've been made by speech therapists for speech therapy, and then others are generic. And to be honest, the ones I use the most are generic. And then the digital, there's often a digital version of what you're already doing. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but sometimes that just comes down to space and money. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy the app version of something than the actual real version, or it might be that you just can't fit a bunch of stuff in your bag that day, and the digital version is better. So I will talk about that a little bit too. Obviously, I'm speaking as someone who travels out. However, if you have a clinic, this still applies, just maybe a little bit different. Your mindset might adapt a little for that. So I'm going to cover my favorite apps very soon. So then what's the difference between apps and digital speech therapy materials? Digital speech therapy materials are files that are read by software on your computer or apps on your tablet. So for example, anyone who's opened anything in Adobe Acrobat Reader or PowerPoint or Google Slides in the last few weeks for teletherapy will know what I'm talking about. You get the file and then you open it in the reader, whether it be Adobe, PowerPoint, whatever software you need to run it. And so that is where you need the app. So digital speech therapy materials are opened in apps. They're generally created by an SLP for SLP use. Either you as the speech therapist may make your own digital speech therapy materials, or you may choose to purchase some or download them for free online. Also, a material, we think of it differently to an app because it's generally a file you download, and often some of us provided a printable version as well if applicable and if that makes sense for the product. or the download. It's often formatted to work in person and in teletherapy. It's often been formatted to work on your iPad and on your computer. And it's often able to be used on a variety of systems. So for example, a Windows computer and then an iOS device and things like that. So that's another way that digital speech therapy materials are different from an app. So some really popular ones, probably the 4 most popular ones will be interactive PDFs, which we'll talk about tonight, PowerPoint games we'll talk about, and boom cards we'll talk about. Google activities I'm not going to talk about so much, but Google Slides is the one that's the most often used, and it's pretty similar to PowerPoint, but most people seem to use Google Slides in more of the edit aspect. Google activities are just kind of a broad topic, so we won't look at them too much tonight. Okay. But it is just something to think about using those Google apps. Okay, so let's take a look at some of my favorite apps, digital materials, and virtual manipulatives. Okay, do we have any questions before I click the next button? Oh, by the way, if ever there's something pictured, if it's mine, there'll be a link to grab it if you did want to, or you can click the picture. Sometimes, not this one, because I put the link down here, and it will take you there, just so you know. All right, apps. This is my ultimate favorite app. If I just had to pick one app, this is it. It's the Digital Articulation Assessment by Little B Speech. It's called Articulation Test Center. It's amazing. It is very comprehensive. You can adapt it to your students by saying what you want to assess, or do a full test or a screener. It looks at initial, medial, and final, and it looks at a speech sample. It also when you put in the errors, right, you can easily put in your errors right then and there during therapy, and it automatically will program the phonological process. So if the child is fronting, and so therefore you change a K to a T, then it automatically will add to your report that the child is fronting. It does submit a report for you. I mean, it writes a report for you, and then you can edit it, obviously, to add your own individualized opinions and information, and it is norm referenced. They compare the results to the current data of normative data, and in your report it does say, like, this is the age in which the child is currently at for their age. They should be saying these sounds. These are ones we recommend you work on. These are the ones we recommend you just keep an eye on. And obviously it's all, you can change that. Obviously they're not saying they replace a speech therapist, but it really is just so great. And then it saves all the scores in the app view, so when you reassess the child again, you can really look and compare their scores. And another great thing is how affordable it is. So you get 5 assessments free, and then I'm pretty sure it's only like $15 for 5 more tests, or maybe even $10 for 5 more tests, maybe even $5. I'm sorry, I can't remember. You can go unlimited, and then you just get unlimited, and that's what I did. I think it's like $60 American, and you get unlimited for the rest of your life, as many tests as you want. So yeah, it's really great. All right, digital coloring book. There are a bunch of them, but I love this one the most. And if you turn the Wi-Fi off, you don't get ads. One thing to note is you need to make sure that you've opened something and kind of colored one thing, and then remove it again for it to then work offline, because it kind of adds it to the app. Have a look at that. This digital color. So by the way, guys, on these slides, these are what are linked. So if you click this here, this is what's linked, and same here. So if you click it down here, and I've included the price in here so you can see. Obviously some have in-app purchases, but yeah, I really like this app. I often use it as a kind of like a barrier game, or just as a reward for kids who really like to color. So this is one of those examples where it's nice just to have it on hand. If a student really likes coloring and you don't have coloring pages with you, or a coloring book, or markers, or anything, you can just use this app. I do have also, because I have so many articulation students, as you can probably tell from the content I create, I've made an app companion for this, which aligns to the colors, so for all the speech sounds, and you can check that out if you want. That's linked here. But I really like this app for digital coloring, and it has a ton of pictures with a ton of different themes. Okay, this is probably my second favorite app. I'll probably say this a few times though. The digital dice maker app's only $3, and it is so great. So you can make a bunch of apps, a bunch of dice, and add them to your table here. You can choose the table, what it looks like, and then you shake it, and when you shake the iPad, it actually makes really fun sounds, and like you see the dice rolling. So here is like a real basic game where that we set up. So my students and I often will make the dice together. Like, that's half the fun. The kids feel like they've made made an app. So we've got our L words here. So the child and I chose what L words we wanted to target. Again, great functional use of the speech sound there. We have a normal dice, and then we had the blue dice, which was how many times we have to say our word. So we would roll the dice, and so if this was me, I would have to say leg 7 times, but I get 5 points. And then we just keep track of the points on a whiteboard, and we're trying to get more points than the other one. So the white dice was our points, and the blue one was our numbers we had, how many times we had to say our speech word. The great thing about this is we also like to make Spider-Man versus, let's just say that it's Spider-Man versus Superman, or Spider-Man versus his villain or something. We have a dice that has equal sides Spider-Man and the villain, equal sides point. We also have a points dice, and we're kind of playing like who's gonna win, the Spider-Man or the villain, and we just shake it to see each time how many points each one gets, and one of us plays as the good guy and one of us plays as the bad guy, and we keep track of our points. So it's a really fun way to get creative, and the kids like making up their own games with it as well. So I've linked to that there for you. Alright, Doodle Buddy is a really awesome annotation app that's more than annotation, because it has built in like a 4 in a row board, tic-tac-toe board. It has a bunch of different stuff built in, which is very cool, but also you can input any image and you can like write on top of it, you can paint, you can add stickers or stencil things, and so you just change the background to be whatever picture you want. So I really like Doodle Buddy, it's kind of fun. And then this one here is also really awesome, Tiny Decisions. You customize digital spinners and other chance-based activities. So again, everything's linked. So you can create a spinner with words, you can do a coin flip, and you can edit the content of what's on them. I've never done this one here, so I don't really know what this is, the touch to decide. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I've shown it on an iPhone here, but it works on an iPad as well. It's called Tiny Decisions. All right. So remember before I talked about interactive PDFs, right? So these are the 3 PDF reader apps I use the most. So Apple Books already will be on your iPad unless you've deleted it, and then you can just get it back. It's free. All these apps are free. But this one here, Notes Writer, does have some in-app purchases. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Apple Books reads interactive PDFs the best, and most of us who create interactive PDFs have created them to open in Apple Books. So see here over on this graphic, it just looks really clean. So you got the tick boxes work in Apple Books, the home buttons work, everything just looks really clean, and the buttons aren't an ugly highlighted color, and it just works. So if it works in Adobe, it probably will work in Apple Books. Zodo is really great if you're on an Android, or if for some reason Apple Books isn't working for you, just skip over into Zodo and open something in Zodo. It's really versatile as well, and Zodo has great annotations, so you can annotate on top of it. You can add text boxes, you can draw, you can fill in, you can add pictures, I think, and so that's really great for if you want to digitize a worksheet. So if you have a PDF worksheet, like I said before, that you don't want to print a bunch of them, you can just save it in Zodo and open it in Zodo and annotate it. So annotate meaning fill it in, but you can add text boxes and stuff on top of it. Notes Writer is my favorite because it has clip art you can add in, and so I often will open my digital board games. So you know how I sell some, but also PDF versions anyway. Lesson picks you can export. If you don't have lesson picks, you should totally get lesson picks. It is amazing and so affordable. But lesson picks, you can export PDFs that are board games, right? So you can also make your own board game very easily in PowerPoint, and then exporting as a PDF. So PDF board games I think are really fun, and you can theme them up really nicely. And in Notes Writer, you can add in the clip art to be your game pieces. So that's what often I'll do. Kids like to choose the cars or the animals or something, and you can move that clip art around the board as your game piece. And then obviously you just roll a normal dice. I will never go to a speech therapy session without a dice somewhere in my pencil case or somewhere, and so then you're not split screening, you're not having to like move screens to go back to a spinner or something. And also if you are wanting to use a PDF or a picture board game on your iPad, there's no reason, and you can't get the game pieces in, there's no reason why you can't put that iPad flat on the table and use real game pieces or counters or something, or marker caps, like felt tip caps, and just move it around as the game piece. You're just avoiding the printing, really. So that's, and same with anything where you normally use counters. You can just lay the iPad down. You'll notice that a lot of us who create digital PDFs and stuff for digital use, it will often be the size of an iPad screen. So I format all mine to be an iPad size screen, because in teletherapy that means you can split screen them and still see everything, but on an iPad it just fills the screen and looks nice like an app. All right, so that's all I had to say about that. Oh, also these apps down here. So if any of these all of a sudden become paid, or all of a sudden they have annoying ads, like at the time I'm writing this, these ones are free. I think Notes Writer has a limit to how many you can open. But PDF Expert is another one you can annotate in, and PDF Element is another one you can annotate in, which I really like. So there's lots, but it is kind of it's very hard to find the good ones. So those are the good ones. I've done the work for you. All right, PowerPoint is an app that you can add for free onto your iPad. Also, if you have an Office 365 account, you can sign into the PowerPoint app and do even more. Obviously, if you've watched my content or you know anything about me, PowerPoint games are my jam. They are my expertise. That's what I love to create. So as you're seeing here on these visuals, PowerPoints are so much more than presentations. So here's some PowerPoint games that I've made, but it's just some examples. So most of my PowerPoint games will work on an iPad, and most others will as well, but it's I would hope that the person who's created the PowerPoint game you're using, if it's not you, I mean, has stated whether or not it will work on an iPad and that they've tested it on an iPad, because you've got to make sure that they work, because some things are a bit different from each app. I wouldn't want to create PowerPoints in the app if I could sign in, because if you can't sign into the app, you can't edit. So the free PowerPoint app, you don't need to be able to edit most PowerPoint games anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's just the little disclaimer. If you are going to get any of mine, read the description before you buy, because some you will need to edit. Okay. All right, okay, Epic and Libby, these are two things that you may have been using in your browser that actually have an app. So Epic and Libby are ebooks, places you can get ebooks. I have a blog post on finding digital books for free on my blog. My blog is linked on the front page of these notes, so you can go check it out. And many of you may have been using Epic already in teletherapy. It's a really comprehensive ebook library. I use it a lot. It's so nice at the end of a session to just grab out your iPad and be like, do you want to read a book? Or if you want to use books during therapy, to just know you have them all there. And I used to go to the Scholastic book sales and just spend hundreds of dollars, as I'm sure many of us have done. And yes, of course, not all Scholastic books are in Epic, but it is just nice to know that I have this library of books that I can continue to make companions for, or just use really open-ended in therapy, the ways we like to use books. Epic has audiobooks, and Epic has books that can be read to the student, and it has books you can read yourself that doesn't have words, like it doesn't have it being read to the student. Please note, I'm not unless it's something I've made, I'm not affiliated with any of these people. I just really like these things. Okay. All right, Book Creator. Oh my gosh, I love Book Creator. I've been using Book Creator since I was a baby speech therapist 7 years ago. Book Creator is amazing. You can create digital EPUBs, is technically what it's called. That's the file type. So that's beyond like a PDF. You can add narration, which is so good for working on language and speech, and kids can make books about themselves, and then they can talk about what's in the picture. If you're working on colorful semantics, you could put the picture in there and then write the colorful semantics or symbolize the colorful semantic sentence, and then have the kids say it and record it. You can put in videos, and then what you do is you export it from Book Creator to iBooks, and then the kid can flip through it just like a normal ebook, and you can hit the button and hear yourself talking or whatever has been said. You can watch the videos all within iBooks. It's just this really nice, clean way of looking at your content. But also, I use Book Creator on my computer as well because it's free to use in the browser. And then what you can do, I probably assume it's also in the app as well, but I definitely know this is in the browser on my computer, that you can export a link. Yeah, it would be the same on the iPad app. You can export a link that's a private link that you can send home to families, and then the kids can see their work or can see their book. If they've made a speech book for homework, they can sit down with their mum and dad and read it. And on any device that can access Chrome, because it's on the internet. It's just amazing. I love Book Creator. So shout out to Parkside School for showing me about this. They bought me my first ever Book Creator app, and I'm in. All right, okay. This is probably my most used game type set of apps, and that's recipe apps. I've put Cupcake Maker in there as an example, but mostly because I want to point out this creator, Blue Bear Technologies here. So if you go to this in the App Store and then hit Blue Bear Technologies, you can see what else they make. I've tried a lot of, other than Toka Boca Kitchen, because come on guys, Toka Kitchen's the best. But other than that, these guys have so many make type games that can facilitate so much language, or can be a barrier game, or you could work on functional phrases, or you can work on sequencing, right? Because it's like, well, what did I do first? I put in the milk and then we put in the cocoa powder. So you could make some activities from screenshots. You could make screenshots and like make some cards to sequence that you print off. They've got make a cupcake, make a hot dog, make a cake, they've just got everything. And the kids love junk food themed games. My students definitely love it. Don't play it when you're hungry. But if you've been loving like make a pizza, make a cupcake on ABC during teletherapy, these are a really great alternative. And I do for this one here, Cupcake Maker, because I use it the most. I have an app companion for that with like some printable receipts where you can like practice asking for the cupcake, and then you use the receipt to make sure that you've got the right order, a bunch of barrier things, some articulation things. So if you do want to check that out, that's there. But that's not why I included it. I really love Blue Bear Technologies cooking apps and recipe apps. Okay, now this is just like, I can't go on and on about all of them, so I've just quickly put some here. Fun with Directions is a really great app that's similar to Colorful Semantics, and you organize the sentence in step by step, and then at the end you can see it animated. So if you chose the bear is eating a cookie, you'll see the bear eat the cookie. YouTube and Spotify I use a ton. Great for looking things up. So for example, I have some really inquisitive kids, and I love when they ask questions like, we've read a book and they're like, oh, like dragons love tacos, and then they're asking, well, how's salsa made? And so it's like, well, let's go look. And we can look on YouTube and talk about how salsa's made, and we can infer some things, and we can we can talk about a lot of stuff to do with that video and sequence it. Spotify is great for rewards. I'll often do dance parties with my students as a reward, requesting songs. Core vocabulary, turn it up, turn it down, next song, turn it off, and then requesting different songs. I have a playlist that I have saved on my Spotify with a bunch of preschool songs that have nice repetitive phrases that I like to use a lot, like, like Wheels on the Bus and others like that. Now Skip is probably, other than the AAC apps on my iPad, one of the most expensive apps on my iPad, but I love it. Skip is an app that was created by Lynn Williams, who is one of the leading researchers in phonology and articulation. She has created an app that helps you put in your errors, and then it generates the targets for you based on research, and you choose your phonological approach. So for example, I use it the most for multiple oppositions, because multiple opposition is like a brain gymnastics, just trying to find your multiple opposition minimal pairs. It's crazy. So I use it the most for multiple oppositions, but it also does minimal pairs and treating the empty set and cycles. I think those are them. But if you're not doing multiple oppositions, I don't recommend buying it. It's so much money that you could probably just make some speech cards really quickly on lesson picks. But it is amazing for multiple oppositions. If you're doing multiple oppositions, it takes all the brain work out of it. So these are all linked as well. I've put this in here just to point out, Math Learning Centre has a bunch of great manipulatives. So this is a geoboard. I had a really hard time finding geoboards in New Zealand, and geoboards are are really fun hands-on for your kiddos that really like really manipulative hands-on things. And I often I'll do like, you know, say your word 10 times and you can have a rubber band. But this is a virtual geo board, which is really great. But they also have actually I'll turn my camera back on because I want to show you. Just a second. All right, just a second, guys. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can show you this. Oh, is this gonna work? Let me see. Can you guys see me? Sorry, guys. Yay, I'm here. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see me. So these pattern blocks, I ordered them from China because I found them really hard to find here. I really like to use these in speech therapy. Sometimes I wrap them up in tinfoil to create extra language opportunities, but then you can build pictures with them. So let's share my screen again. Bear with me, guys. So this company that makes the geo, can you guys all see my screen? This company that makes the geo boards, they also have the pattern blocks like these. And then they're the same as what you can get on Toy Theatre as well. Toy Theatre have them, but of course this is an app and Toy Theatre's in the browser, so it's not as clean to use. So yeah, that's an example of those. And then there's, is it called My Home? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on this, but it's a very popular app to use. It's a very functional app. It's where you move through a home and, like, you know, you touch the radio and it'll start playing noise. You know, you can move. It's great for prepositions, following directions, core vocabulary. You're pretty much, you know, you choose which room in the house you want to go to and then you make the bed. Really fun. Play Home, My Play Home, that's what it's called. This one here I don't use so much these days, but when I worked at Parkside I used it a lot, and that's Bitsboard. The only reason I don't use it so much these days is Parkside paid for it when I was there. Bitsboard is awesome. I think it is worth the money if you're going to use it. Bitsboard takes images and turns them into like 50 different types of games that you can use, and you can input your own images, but also they have massive libraries that you get if you're the paid version as well. And just look into it if you're someone that really wants to move to making some digital games with pictures and stuff. So for example, it will make, you can choose like, now I want to play bingo, now I want to make it into a puzzle, now I want to make it into a quiz game, now I want to make it into a spelling game, and you're just using the same pictures. It's kind of like a digital version of Lesson Picks, kind of. Now Paprika, I'm going to talk about this for just a second because it's not a speech therapy app, but if you're anything like me and you're really busy and you struggle with meal planning and meal prep, and that's something you want to do to make life easier for you, check out Paprika. It's awesome, and that's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Okay, so we've talked about apps. I finished talking about apps. Feel free to pop your questions in there. Let's be honest, there are so many more I probably could share if I just thought about it, or if we just sat down and went through my iPad, but I just had to pick the ones I use the most. These apps are the ones that are kind of my go-tos that I use the most, but there are some really awesome apps out there. Also some apps that I got when I first started my career that no longer are available in New Zealand, which is really sad. The iZen app is great for early language, and there's also some pegboard apps and stuff that I just can't seem to find anymore, even though they're on my iPad. The Perler app, Perler, which is another virtual pegboard where, you know, you make those iron-on beads and stuff. But I just can't find them anymore, even though they're on my iPad. So sorry, guys. But this is just some of them. I do have a Facebook group called Using Your iPad in Speech Therapy, and I haven't been as active in there recently because of the whole most people needing help with teletherapy thing. But that is a Facebook group you can join if you want to. Reach out to me if you have questions. Okay, I'm seeing a question about what was the one I mentioned before, Paprika. It's called Bitsboard. I've linked to it in the notes as well. It's got a free version and a pro version, but I recommend the pro if you're going to use it. It's kind of one of those ones that the free version's pretty great, but to get the most out of it, the pro's pretty cool. So check that out. Okay, but now I want to talk about digital materials. So digital materials, let's be honest, most of the time you're probably going to buy them from someone who's made them or download them for free. You can make your own digital materials for sure, but the reason I love using my iPad in speech therapy is because it saves me time. The exception would be something like Lesson Picks. For example, we'll talk about that in a moment. Lesson Picks is quick and easy and you make it yourself, or you might want to make a quick board game in Google Slides or PowerPoint or something. or, you know, some flashcards or something. If you make them in PowerPoint and export them to PDF, great, you can just flick through them. You know, flashcards are really easy to make digitally. We're not going to talk about that today, but in general, if it's like a really involved digital material, it's generally going to be something that someone else has made and you've purchased it, or you've downloaded it for free. It's a file. So the first one we're going to talk about is interactive PDFs, and we've talked about these a little bit, that you open them in PDF readers. I've talked about PDF readers that I'd recommend earlier in this presentation. You open them up in the PDF reader apps, and then you can annotate them. An interactive PDF, you don't need to use the annotation tools because it will have the tick boxes, the text boxes that you type in will already be there. That's the difference between an interactive PDF and a static PDF. You can open both in PDF readers, but it's an interactive PDF. You can type in it, or you can tick off boxes. So for example, this book companion, right? It's digital and it's printable, but we're going to talk about the digital version. When you open this up in iBooks, once you've added your content, because it's editable, there's text boxes the kids can type into for compare and contrast. They can tick off as they describe an item. There's sequencing that they can choose to either order with numbers, or another one where they can type in their answers. There's articulation activities that you can use as a board game. There's like all those kind of things. And then you've got things like this one here, which editable and interactive no print games, where I've added the tick boxes and you go around the outside with counters, and that would be kind of like I talked about earlier with Notes Writer, where you can add in the clip art, or you might again, that's above, or you might just use normal counters and then tick off in the tick boxes. And then there's ones like this that have been made to just be like a big pack of games in a PDF that you open. And then of course I talked earlier about making flashcards. The interactive ones are a little bit next level, so these have like the tick boxes, so you tick off your productions, and then there's next buttons and home buttons and navigations and menus, so you can pick which sound you want to work on in what position. So it's more like an app. So often, if there's something like, there are definitely apps out there that you can buy that are like articulation apps with flashcards and stuff. Often it's going to be a lot more affordable for you to buy an interactive PDF and open it in iBooks. And as you can see, like these look like apps once you open them. They've got, especially if they've been done well, and they have like the home buttons and the navigation buttons and stuff like that. All right, so PowerPoint games, again, totally my jam. You open these in the free version of PowerPoint most of the time, but disclaimer, some of mine you will need the paid version. Some PowerPoint files can be opened in Google Slides, not mine, but this is where I put lesson pics and graphics. Okay, so lesson pics, you can export a board game or a activity with tokens on top of it. I think I've spoken about this before, but you can always go to the YouTube channel and they show you how to do it. On the lesson pics, you're choosing to export it as a PowerPoint, but you can open that in Google Slides if you wanted to. So I wouldn't open it in the free version of PowerPoint on an iPad. I'd open it in Google Slides because then you can edit it. You need the paid version of PowerPoint to edit on an iPad. So because you play those in edit mode, so you can drag and drop the game pieces around, or whatever the game is you've exported from lesson pics. So if you've been using any of those during teletherapy, you can now open them in Google Slides on your iPad. No internet is required for either of these apps, so long with PowerPoint there's no internet required, but with Google Slides you have to have opened it in Google Slides first. So you for example, I will open it in Google Slides when I'm at home in my office with Wi-Fi, and then now in the future, whenever I go to the Google Slides app, when I open it, the activity will be there and I won't need internet access to see it. But obviously if you've stored something in your drive and you haven't opened it in Google Slides, then yes, you need internet that first time. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm going too fast for you guys. I just really want to honor your time. We've already been going for 50 minutes, so I just want to get through this content. Remember, it is recorded and there are notes. Okay, companions. This is probably my number one way of using activities, digital activities, to make my prep time way easier, like way easier. So I made these companions pretty much just because I wanted them for therapy. So let's give you an example. So these can be PowerPoints, interactive PDFs, or printables that you open as a PDF and annotate on top of. But obviously make PowerPoint ones. So for example, this one here, you spin the spinner to see what sword you're going to put in the pirate, and then it tells you what speech word you have to do. We're looking at the V in medial position here, and how many times you need to say your word, 5 or 10 times, right? So this companion was made so that I could target articulation with just picking up my iPad and picking up pop-up pirate. But then I also made an open-ended spinner that looks kind of like this one here, where we can just spin the swords, and then it has an editable worksheet that goes with it. So if I had a kid working on language goals, I could just type their questions into their worksheet, and when they spin a red sword, they look at what picture goes with that question, what question goes with that sword. So companions, I'm really passionate about companions because it's where you bring together a favorite. So, like these things are all favorites for my students, using dot markers, using these kind of games and coloring. But you're using your device to mean that you've now made that activity that they really love into the therapy. It's not a reinforcer anymore. It is the therapy activity. And I think that is where you get this beautiful amalgamation of reducing your prep time and increasing engagement. Because you're not saying do this drill thing, then you can do the fun thing. You're saying let's do the fun thing, and the kids don't even notice that it's not all just a part of it, because it all matches. So digital companions is something I'm really passionate about for in-person therapy, if you can't tell. I did recently make digital versions of these games like Pop Pig, Pop Pirate, Crocodile. We'll have a look at those in a moment. But that was for teletherapy. Like you can use it on your iPad, and we're going to look at that, especially if you don't own these games or you don't want to carry around the big boxes with these things in it. Like I love having them on my computer if the kids are on my iPad. If the kid says, I want to play Pop the Pig, and you're like, oh crap, I didn't bring it. You'll have the digital version on your iPad, but I do just really like these companions for that reason as well. All right. Boom cards. Right. The world went crazy for boom cards. When teletherapy hit, it's like, wow, boom cards will have been having really great business these last few weeks. It's kind of like everyone just synonymously thinks boom cards. They think teletherapy and boom cards, like the same thing. Same with Zoom. I don't know about if you guys feel this way, but it's definitely the American speech therapists as well on Instagram and stuff. So boom cards are awesome. Don't get me wrong. There's just more to digital resources, as we can see, than boom cards. But yeah, boom cards will work on your iPad. You just need to install the app, which is great. It's free. You log in with your login, and then everything that's on your library in the browser will now be on your iPad. Do note, you need internet access to use them. That's, to be honest, why I don't use them much, because I often am out in the schools, and unless it's a school I go to often, I might not have Wi-Fi, and I guess I could hotspot like we've talked about before, but boom cards really are great, and there's a huge library of digital resources. There's a ton of speech therapy ones for most goals. They're really awesome, so definitely look at those. All right, so we've got 2 slides left. Oh, doing good for time. Right, you might be saying, okay, Brooke, you've shown me all these files. How the heck do I store those files on my iPad so that when I want to use them, I can just open them in the app? Because like we've talked about, you need internet if you want to use a cloud service. Like if you want to store it in your Google Cloud or your Dropbox or your OneDrive, you need internet access to then bring it down from the cloud and open it in the apps. Well, I use this app called FE File Explorer. It is amazing. I have a blog post on it. Click that in the link. You can go have a look at it. I have a YouTube video that shows you exactly how to use it. Obviously, if you want to store these materials on your iPad, you need to have space on your iPad. So if you have an iPad that's like 12 years old that only has 8 gigs of space on it, you probably want to use a cloud service and use the internet, definitely, or stick to apps. But digital resources are so great, you should just use a cloud service. All right. And then I have one more thing to say. If you do want more digital materials, I have a membership site coming out in the next couple of weeks. It's currently being in maintenance mode. It's being built, where you can choose to join the Simply Digital SLP Club, and you get instant access to all my resources. So you don't have to, so often people know me as selling on Teachers Pay Teachers, and that you can definitely find my content there, and that's what I've linked to throughout this presentation. But this will be a yearly subscription where you pay every year, and it gives you access to every single digital product, not my printables, because my thing is digital. Printables is something I made like years ago. All my digital products, and then anything I make in that year that you have the subscription, you get instant access to as well. And then if you choose to renew, then you will get even more products every single year as I create more. Everything I add to TPT within reason will get uploaded into that site, plus there will be extra exclusive things that are only for my club members. So that is coming very soon. Please keep an eye out, because there will be a discount code when I launch, and you can always click this button to learn more. It will take you to the website, which will currently tell you it's in maintenance mode, but depending on where you click the button, hopefully it'll be there. All right, we are done, guys. Thank you so much.